thankful to all the present attendees here for giving your valuable time on this Sunday's pleasant evening. This is Advocate Pulkit Mahawar here to deal with the topic on the corporate insolvency resolution process. A brief introduction about it under the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code 2016. Without further delay, let's deep dive into the topic. What is IBC? The IBC is one of the mature steps towards setting the legal position with respect to financial failures and insolvency. To provide with an easy exit with a painless mechanism in case of insolvency and insolvency resigns for further failures. To provide with an easy exit with a painless mechanism in case of insolvency of individuals and companies, and the code has the significant value for all the stakeholders, including various regulators within the code. Since 2014, the Reserve Bank of India has cracked down significantly on the bad loan situations accumulated in the banking system. Government had tried to supplement the problem by every progressive and constructive initiative, such as the Joint Lenders Forum, that is known as JLF, and the strategic debt restructuring and such other mechanisms. The framework, though unable to address all the situations, are a step forward towards a resolution culture. The two mainly objectives of the IBC, as we all know in a layman's, can be firstly to protect the interest of all the stakeholders and even to grant the protection to the lenders who might suffer loss due to the default of a corporate debtor or the borrower. Now, if we move towards the preamble of a code, there are two major fold objectives. One objective is the maximization of the value of the assets, and the other is to complete the corporate insolvency resolution process in a time-bound manner that is provided under IBC. Now, moving forward to the what is IBC as per the code. If we look towards the code, it is a consolidated legislation which provides for the well-established procedure, insolvency resolution process for individual, corporate firms, corporate persons, partnership firms, and limited liability partnership. However, I would like to bring it to your knowledge the last not the least thing, that is it is not a remedy for the debt recovery. Here, the main objective of the IBC is to revive the corporate debtor or the dead corporate debtor by giving it into the hands of others. Now, the authorities under the code, however, as every law contains the certain authorities, like in CPC, CRPC, we have the authorities of the magistrate, judicial magistrate. Similarly, in IBC, we have two kinds of authorities. One is the regulating authority, the other is the adjudicating authorities. The regulator authority or the regulating authority comprises of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India. The Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India exercises powers over the insolvency professional agencies, insolvency professionals, and the information utilities. Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India, like we can say, is a key pillar of the ecosystem for implementation of the code. It is like a unique regulator that regulates a profession as well as a process. It has a regulatory oversight of insolvency professional as mentioned here, insolvency professional agencies, information utilities, and such other entities. Now, moving towards the adjudicating authority. The adjudicating authority are, like we can say, in two parts. That is, firstly, for the corporate person, the adjudicating authority is the NCLT. In short form, further, I will be referring to it AA. And the adjudicating authority for the individual and partnership firms is Debt Recovery Tribunal, that is known as DRT. However, here we will be dealing with the NCLT, as the NCLT is the adjudicating authority for the corporate persons. Now, here is the hierarchy of the tribunal or the we can say adjudicating authority here. Firstly, we have to file a petition before an NCLT, that is the adjudicating authority. As we all know, NCLT is formed and constituted under Section 408 of the Companies Act 2013. If the NCLT passes the order and the person is not aggrieved from the order, can file an appeal to the NCLAT, that is the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, within the 30 days of the order. However, if the person is aggrieved from the order of the NCLAT, then he may file to the apex authority, that is the Supreme Court, within the 45 days of the order. Now, as every code has or the act has an interpretation clause, basically here we will be moving forward in a very short period here for the corporate persons. As we all know that the corporate persons are defined under section 2 clause 7 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Who are the corporate persons now? Corporate persons, like we can say, are companies that are formed under section 2013, or the LLP that is formed under the LLP Act 2008, or such other body corporates that are formed under any law for the time being in force. Let's move towards the another definition, that is the corporate debtor. Who is a corporate debtor? Now, the corporate debt. Now we will be talking about the corporate debtor a lot in Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, because a corporate debtor, like we can say, a criminal, not merely a criminal, but like we can say a great kind of a defaulter, we can say, to the corporate debtor. Who is a corporate debtor? Corporate debtor, like we can say, as a person to whom any debt, to whom any loan has been given, or who has borrowed the loan from any of the financial institution, or who has taken the financial services from any of the financial institution, or from any of the banking companies, or from the banks. Now, who is a corporate person here? Now, the corporate person, one more thing. In corporate persons, within the definitions, the person who is a financial service provider is not included. It is expressly mentioned under the code. Insolvency professional. Who is an insolvency professional here? Insolvency professional is a person who has been appointed by the code to complete the process of CIRP within a time frame as provided under the code. Now, who is a person? Like in a layman terms, we can say like a person can be a man, a woman, or such some other thing. But a company is also known as a juristic person. So, in the definition of a code, we can say the person includes includes an individual, a partnership firm. Our main thing are a Hindu undivided family, that is known as a HUF, in short form, a trust or a limited liability partnership, or such other entity which is established by any of the statute. Now, the adjudicating authority, as we have stated earlier, that the adjudicating authority is formed under section 408 of the Companies Act 2013. Adjudicating authority means the NCLT, which I have referred to earlier. Now, who is a corporate applicant? Corporate applicant, as we know from the word corporate, means a company. It can be a corporate debtor. It can be a member or a partner of a corporate debtor, or a person who is authorized to make an application for the corporate insolvency resolution process, or any of the pre-pack insolvency resolution process under the constitutional document of the corporate debtor, or an individual who is in charge of the managing the operations of the corporate debtor, or the person who has a control over the for the supervision over the financial affairs of any of the company or the corporate debtor. Now, who is a corporate guarantor? From a corporate guarantor, we can see like he's a guarantee. He's a person giving the guarantee. Now, in what terms here we are referring to the person as a guarantor? Guarantor, like for example, like I am taking a loan from a bank, and my friend is giving a guarantee in case if I fail to repay that loan, my friend will be called forward to pay that loan. Corporate guarantor means here a company. So a company means a corporate person who is the surety in a contract of guarantee to a corporate debtor. For example, like we can take the example of JP. Now JP takes the loan from a HDFC banks, and if they default in making any of the repayments, so and the guarantee, corporate guarantee, is given by the HDFC securities. The HDFC securities will be called forward to repay the amount which the HDFC to repay the amount for the JP if the JP defaults. Now, financial creditor. Who is a financial creditor? Financial creditor is a main person under the code, as he has to recover his debt. Now, financial creditor means any person to whom any financial debt is owed, includes a person to whom such debt has been legally assigned or transferred to. As legally assigned here, now we can say that a person who has been having granted a loan to some other person and is unable to recover. However, he may assign such loan to any other person, and asks him to recover it, and he will be paying the percentage of the recovery to the assigner. In kind of a assignment of a loan, there are two kind of a parties involved. One is the assigner, the other is the assignee. Moving forward to the another definition, that is the financial debt. Financial debt means a debt along with interest which is disbursed against the consideration for the time value of money. It includes money borrowed against the payment of interest or any amount raised by acceptance under any credit facility or any amount raised pursuant to the note purchase facility or the issue of the bonds, notes, debenture loans, etc., etc. Now, I have a brief one thing to get you all know aware of this thing. We all know what is a financial debt. Financial debt means a debt which has been borrowed from any person against for the payment of without to repay it with the payment of interest. Now, financial debt also includes a kind of a debt which is interest-free loans. Recently, the Supreme Court of India has provided in one of the case that the Samir Sales Private Limited case, a debt which is interest free is also considered as a financial debt. The judgment was delivered by Honorable Justice Indra Banerjee and Justice V. Ramasubramaniam. Now, who is an operational creditor? Operational creditor has a lot of role to play in the code. Operational creditor, like we can say, a person to whom operational debt is owed and includes any person to whom such debt has been legally assigned. Now, the last definition would be here would be in the as per the PPT will be operational debt. What is operational debt? Operational debt means a claim in respect of any goods or services which any person has purchased or hired from any other entities or from any other corporate entities, and it also includes the debt of the central government or the state government. For example, the payment of taxes, which is the major source of income for the government revenue. Now, who can initiate CIRP? CIRP can be initiated by three persons. Firstly, a financial creditor can initiate CIRP under Section 7 of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, and any person to whom any then operation creditor can initiate a CIRP process under Section 9 of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. Then a corporate debtor means a company can itself initiate a insolvency bankruptcy petition against itself under Section 10 of the code, provided as under Section 6 that within the 3 years from the date of default. Now, there is a limitation period to file for the CIRP petition. That has to be, the CIRP petition has to be filed within the 3 years from the date of default. For example, I am running a company for known as Tires Limited. I have taken loan from a ICICI Bank of 5 crores of rupees. That is a financial loan. So now I'm unable to pay that loan. The loan was disbursed on 21st of March 2013, and I have paid the installment till, like we can say, 21st of March 2015. I started paying the installment, and then I paid the installment in 21st of March 2016. However, I have defaulted in paying the installments. Now, calculating the 3 years, in 2019, the ICICI Bank within 3 years, till 2019, the ICICI Bank has a right to claim that money from me and can initiate an insolvency petition against me under Section 7 of the code. Now, operation creditor, like who is to whom any goods or services have been supplied, can also file a petition under Section 9 of the code, provided he has to fulfill certain things. First of all, operational creditor has to send a demand notice that Mr. So-and-so, you are not paid my such kind of a dues for the goods and services which I have supplied to you or have provided to you, and you are liable to pay such and such amount, and he will provide the time frame that within these many days you have to make my payment. However, the corporate debtor does not make the payments to the operational creditor. The operational creditor can file an insolvency petition within the 3 years from the date of default under Section 9. Now, the corporate debtor can also file an application under insolvency bankruptcy petition under section 10 of the code, provided he has to fulfill certain mandatory conditions. Certain mandatory conditions like he cannot file a petition as per his wish. However, where a corporate, he has to file a petition. Firstly, he has to see that he has committed a default, and thereof he may file an application for initiating CIRP within the with the adjudicating authority, and he requires the following documents: that the information relating to the books of the accounts and such other documents which might be relevant, the information relating to the resolution proposed to be appointed as IRP, and the special resolution of the shareholders of the corporate debtor by at least three-fourths of the total members of the partners of corporate debtor, as the case may be, approving filing of the application. Now, one thing I would like to tell you all before moving forward to the major part of the filings, uh, what is the minimum amount of a default? What is the pecuniary jurisdiction under IBC? See, as when the code has came into the existence of the enforcement, the minimum amount of a default was set by the ministry was 1 lakh rupees. However, it has been provided that the central government may by notification change the minimum amount of default. Now currently the minimum amount of a default is rupees 1 crore. However, if any person having his claim below rupees 1 crore has to opt any other remedies that are with the civil codes. Now, who can initiate CIRP? Who can initiate CIRP? As we have seen, financial creditors, operational creditors, a corporate debtor, provided that the minimum amount of a default should be rupees 1 crore. Now, what are the consequences of filing the petition under IBC? Now, first of all, I would like to go through sections and all so that you all can be aware what is the basic idea, like basic criteria for filing a petition. Firstly, a financial creditor under section 7, he can file, as we have already seen. Now he can file a petition with other financial creditors jointly also, provided that such petition should be accompanied by the documents like his statement of accounts, where he has to show that the person has been created a default has occurred, and it is also provided that the real estate allottees or the home buyers are also considered as a financial creditors as per the Supreme Court judgment in Pioneer Urban and Chitra Sharma versus Union of India, that is the JP Infra, the famous case. It has also been provided that for initiating CIRP process, a corporate debtor has to refer to all the like for defending, as a corporate debtor has to defend to provide that the default has not occurred. So you may take such necessary steps also if he is true at the standing position, which the stand which he is taking. Now, once we file a petition before NCLT, NCLT, it shall be accompanied by such fees as provided under the Court Fees Act or as per the other rules regulations. The financial creditor, along with application, has to furnish the records of a default recorded with the information utility or such other records or the evidence of a default. Because if we do not have a evidence of a default, our petition will be dismissed by the Honorable NCLT. However, we need to prove that there is an evidence that such default has occurred. If the financial creditor has known any person who can be a insolvency professional, he may recommend a name to the court for the insolvency professional, that such person to be appointed as an insolvency professional, and he will be taking over the charge over all the things further. Now the main part, the adjudicating authority, that is NCLT, when we file a petition, within the 14 days of the petition or the application, as the case may be, as to ascertain that the existence of a default from the records of an information utility or from the evidences which are being furnished before the NCLT. It is provided that the adjudicating authority, if it is not ascertained that there is an default has not occurred, or there is no default, it shall reject the petition and shall record its reasons for rejecting the petition. Now, if the adjudicating authority satisfies that the default has occurred and the application or the petition filed under section 7, 9 or 10 whatsoever has been fully completed, is up to the mark, like in layman terms we can say up to the mark, or is as per the scheme of a code, and as per the scheme of the code from the defaults and everything, it shall admit the petition. However, the NCLT has to admit the petition if the default has occurred, or like we can say it is necessary that the petition be admitted, because there is a huge amount of defaults are there. So during that kind of a period, the NCLT will admit the petition after giving an opportunity of being heard to the corporate debtor also. The main part is the existence of a default, that the default must exist. Now, once the default has occurred and the application file is complete and no proceedings or the disciplinary or against the insolvency resolution professional are pending, the NCLT may pass an order for admitting the petition. However, the petition has to be admitted within the time frame as provided under the IBC code, provided that where application for initiating resolution process and corporate debtor has been filed with the FC referred to in the proviso of the section 7 has not been admitted by the AOC before the Insolvency Commencement Act 2020 Amendment Act has been there. So now with adjudicating, for moving forward, the adjudicating authority, whatever orders they are passing, they shall communicate the order to the financial creditor also and to the corporate debtor also. How if the petition is being rejected also, that order has to be also be communicated to the creditors or to the corporate debtors also, both the parties. It is a due responsibility upon the tribunal to fulfill it. The NCLT has to pass an order within that time frame of 7 days once the petition has been admitted or either rejected, as the case may be. Now, section 8 here deals with the procedure like resolution, the specific condition that has to be fulfilled by the operation creditor. As I stated earlier, once the default has occurred on the part of the corporate debtor through goods and services supplied by the operational creditor, the operational creditor has to send a demand notice to the corporate debtor within a period of 10 days. After that, the reply from the corporate debtor, if there or not there, he has to file a petition under section 9 of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. However, the same process will be followed. The NCLT has to pass an order either for the admission or the rejection of the petition within the period of 7 days. Now, further moving forward, once the petition is being admitted, the major part comes into play. A moratorium is declared by the NCLT. Now, what is a moratorium here? Now, moratorium is dealt here under Insolvency Bankruptcy Code 2016 under section 13, which deals with the moratorium and the public announcement. What is moratorium? Moratorium here means there will be a stay on the proceedings, all the proceedings except criminal proceedings. All the civil proceedings or the arbitral proceedings will come to an halt in whichever courts within India that are being going on. Moratorium is like completely stay. Once the petition is admitted, the NCLT will appoint the IRP, that is interim resolution professional, to take over the charge of the corporate debtor. Once the petition is admitted and the IRP is appointed, the powers of the board of directors or the officers of the corporate debtor are suspended. They do not have any authority to exercise power in that company because the petition, insolvency petition is admitted. Now the IRP will take over the charge. IRP will appoint professionals to assist him. IRP now will run the company as a going concern because the main objective of the IBC is provided in the preamble is also to maximize the value of the assets. How will he maximize the value of the assets? If he runs the corporate debtor as a going concern, he will maximize the value of the assets of the corporate debtor. The moratorium, once moratorium is being declared by the court, the public announcement will be made by the IRP. The IRP will make the public announcement that such and such company against the insolvency petition has been admitted. Now, whoever are having their claim shall file their claim within a specified period and in a specified forms as provided under the scheme of a code form A, B, C, E, F before the IRP. Now the IRP will look towards whatever the claims are submitted before him. He has a, like we can say, administrative decision to take whether the claim against a person has to be admitted or it has to be rejected. Now, once IRP is also bound by the principle of natural justice. He has to also provide the reason once why he is rejecting the claim of a particular person. Now, once the claims are admitted, IRP will constitute a COC, that is known as Committee of Creditors. The Committee of Creditors has been formed here because the IRP cannot take the decisions on through his minds or brains or nerves or cells, because he need to take the decisions through the committee. Committee of Creditors consists of the lenders who have financed the amount or the borrowings to, or the funds to the corporate debtor. Financial creditors are the major part of the Committee of Creditors, because as provided in the section 21 of the code, that the Committee of Creditors consists of financial creditors only. It is provided that financial creditors are regulated by a financial sector regulator. And how now, one more thing I would like to tell you all here is there can be a related party also. Now, who can be a related party here? Related party, like we can see any person who is in relation to the directors of a company or other officers of a company. However, they have an interest in the decision making process or the business running process of a corporate debtor. The related parties can never be the part of the Committee of Creditors as per the scheme of a code. The related parties can never take part in COCs. They are debarred from COCs. However, the directors or the other officers of a corporate debtor can attend the COC meetings, but they cannot participate in the decision-making process of the COC. As board of directors take the decision, passes the resolution. Similarly, here a committee of creditors is formed consisting only of the financial creditors, which will be taking decisions here for moving forward towards the insolvency resolution process, as creditors are the majorly stakeholders of the company. Once the creditors committee has been formed, now first COC meeting will be held. In that, firstly they need to take a decision. The person who has been appointed as an IRP will be continuing as an RP. RP here means resolution professional. Like here also we have an administrative hierarchy. One is the interim resolution professional. Interim means he is for a certain period, like from a court. We say na interim, we have taken that interim relief for a shorter period. So interim resolution professional means a resolution professional appointed by the court for a shorter period of a time. So here, once the COC takes a decision that the same IRP will be continuing as an RP, that is resolution professional, then it may pass a resolution by a 66% vote. Earlier, as per the scheme of a court, earlier the votings were consist of 75% of the votes, but literally by the amendment it has been reduced to 66%. So when the COC, that is the Committee of Creditors, has to pass any resolution, it has to get the majority of the votes by 66% votes are needed. Once the COC has been formed and the RP has been appointed, it is the responsibility of the RP to provide information to the NCLT that as per the COC resolutions now dated so and so, they have appointed me as a resolution professional because he's bound to provide information to the NCLT also. Those the NCLT being consisting as an adjudicating authority here. Now all this process, after this process, this IRP has been appointed. What IRP before appointment of an RP, what IRP does? IRP, he has made the public announcement also. Now he has accepted the claims also, and he has prepared the list of all the claimants of the creditors of a corporate debtor. Now after that stage, once the RP has been appointed, they need to create a data room. What is now here data room? That we can say e-data room. In data room, they will gather all the information regarding a corporate debtor. What are the subsidiaries or the holding companies of the corporate debtors, and what are the loans and advances or the interest, debentures, equity shareholders. He will prepare that such kind of a data room, what kind of a business the company is having, how much loans have the company taken, all such things, and what are the litigations. Litigations are going in favor against the company, for the company. He will prepare all such kind of a data rooms. Now, once the data room are being prepared, they will give one more announcement for expression of interest. Expression of interest here means, like we say there is a bidding like for a particular plot. Like we can say there is a bidding for a particular plot that whoever says the highest amount will get over that plot. In Hindi we call it nilami. So here also what they will do, the persons who are interested to acquire this company will have to submit their expression of interest. Now, for running all this corporate insolvency resolution process, the company need the resolution professional lead finances. Already the corporate debtor is insolvent. From where he will raise the finances for running all this process? He will raise the finances from a committee of creditors up to the specific amount for running all this process. Now, once the expression of interest have come, they will ask the persons or the corporate persons who have submitted their expression of interest to submit a resolution plan. Now, all the resolution plans will be submitted before the COC. They will need to take a decisions which resolution plan is the best and which should be accepted. However, the resolution plan has to be chosen as per the interest of all the creditors. It should not cause any hardships to any of the stakeholders of the corporate debtor. Also, the resolution plan which is selected has to get a 66% of voting to get it approved. Once the resolution plans are approved, they need to inform that NCLT that such and such resolution plans are approved, and we are coming to the end of a process now. And uh, however, in resolution plan, they need to state from where they will bring the capital and infuse in such insolvent corporate debtor, how much capital will they infuse, and on what basis they will pay the dues of the operational creditors or the financial creditors. Now, major part here comes, what are the regarding the mortgage properties, the properties which are mortgaged against the satisfaction of a loans or against the shares or the stocks which are pledged or again any hypothecation deed. So they will mention each and everything in that particular resolution plan. Once the resolution plan is being approved, the corporate debtor will go into the hands of other persons. They will revive that corporate debtor and carry on the business. Now, all this process has to be completed within the time frame of 180 days. 180 days plus, however, if the such process is not completed within 180 days, the further extension will be granted by the NCLT for 90 days. However, as per the recent amendment, couple of years back, months back, the whole of the process has to be completed within a period of 330 days only. Moving towards the next main part now. What is a moratorium? As I've already stated, moratorium is being declared here. All the proceedings will be halt. All the proceedings against the corporate debtor. Only the civil proceedings will halt. No criminal proceedings will halt here. Criminal proceedings will continue as it is because it is, as the law does not want give any kind of a escape to the criminals. Claims will be verified, resolution plans will be accepted by the COC within the CIRP period. Last, one more thing here in the process, if no resolution plan is being accepted, the company goes to the process of the liquidation. Firstly, they will try for the CIRP process. If no resolution plan is being approved or received within the time frame, then the company has to go for a litigation. The corporate debtor will go for a liquidation. This commencement process, the IRP will constitute a COC under Section 21. I have stated earlier, COC shall consist of all the financial creditors. Now, the financial creditors will also be of two types, secured creditors, unsecured creditors. It will not consist any of the related parties of the corporate debtor. The COC appoints the RP in the first meeting post its formation. Once the COC is formed, it appoints the resolution professional. Now I will be here moving towards the landmark precedent. Before that, I would like to tell you a certain kind of a thing which I have not spoken about it. There are the certain kind of a transaction provided under IBC. One is the extortionate credit transaction, undervalued transaction, preferential transactions. Now, once we have filed a petition before Honorable NCLT, the NCLT hears the petition arguments for both the parties. Now the NCLT keep that petition as a reserve for order. Now we don't know when the order will be passed now. So once the petition has been kept for the reserve for order here, what tricks, or like we can say different kind of a tactics are played by the officers of the corporate debtor is they get a time period. Once the petition is reserved for order, and like we can say yesterday the petition has been heard, that is on 25th of September, and on 25th of September the NCLT says the petition is reserved for order. Now the NCLT passes the order on 5th of October. Now, what is the period that 25th of September to 5th of October, that is the 10 days period. what the corporate debtor officers or the board of directors do, they find their way to become the creditor of a company. How they can become? They raise their liabilities against the company, that the company is liable to pay them a specific kind of an amount. As the entity wise, if we see, the company is considered as a different person and the individuals are considered as a different persons. So they pass a backdated board resolution that I have provided such services to the company, and the company will be paying me such and such amount. So they now once the company is liable to pay them the amount, they become the creditors of the company. So they find their way to enter the company, enter the committee of creditor, that is a COC here. So this is not a good practice under the law, as if we think of it also, because such transactions are considered as an extortionate rate transaction, undervalue transaction, or a preferential transaction as per the scheme of a code. So now what the financial creditor or the operational creditor who has filed a application for insolvency, what they will do, they need to file a miscellaneous application to bring to the notice of a court that such transactions have happened when the petition was reserved for order. Because earlier if such resolution were passed, why not they have brought their claims or these resolutions to the knowledge of a NCLT during the first hearing? Or why not, if they are the creditors of the company originally, why not have they filed their claims before the insolvency resolution professionals? So this part has to be taken care of, because this leads to the litigation to a longer period. However, but under IBC, they are providing a value to the time. Time is in essence here. The process has to be completed within a period of maximum 330 days. Now I will be moving here towards some landmark judgments. This is the landmark judgment here, the Innovative Industries. This judgment of Innovative Industry. The Innovative Industry was the first exhaustive judgment which is passed by the Honorable Supreme Court of India under the code. Here what the issues were like, whether the state laws will override the central law. As IBC is the central law, it cannot be overridden. The IBC will override the state laws. What ICICI Bank has provided financial assistance to the Innovative Industries, the Innovative Industries were claiming their relief under Maharashtra Relief Act. However, the Maharashtra Relief Act is meant to claim a relief for the employees from their employer, but you cannot take a loan and claim a relief before the court. So what the Supreme Court held, that the IBC is a central legislation, it will override the state law. And one more thing, now once the public announcement has been done, a moratorium has been declared under Section 30, and the insolvency resolution professional is being appointed. As I've stated, that the powers of the board of directors or the other officers like CEO, CO will be suspended. They cannot maintain a petition. It is the only IRP who can maintain a petition before the court. If they file a petition, then the IRP can claim a defense that they're not liable to maintain the petition, because already their powers are being suspended. Now the next case is the Maharashtra Seamless Limited versus Padman Venkateshwar and others. Like the apex court held here that there is no requirement of a resolution plan. as I've stated that it is one of the core objective of a IBC to maximize the value of assets. How will you maximize the value of assets now? The value of assets can be maximized by running the corporate data as a going concern, earning money, which will satisfy more of the more claims and provide satisfaction to the stakeholders of the corporate data. So in here the SRSP cases were referred and the Supreme Court held that once a resolution plan is approved by the COC, the adjudicating authority has a limited power of judicial review. As under Indian Constitution, it is being provided that the courts are having the power of judicial review to keep check and balances on the legislative or the executive actions. Now, who will approve the resolution plan? As I stated earlier, the COC, that is the Committee of Creditors, will approve the resolution plan, but NCLT or the other courts or the tribunals does not have a power to disturb the wisdom of the COC. The COC has a complete power whether to accept a particular resolution plan or not to accept a particular resolution plan. Nobody can disturb the wisdom of the COC. This is the case of a State Bank of India versus Ramakrishna. In this case, the Supreme Court has overruled a lot of judgments here. Here the thing was like, for example, like I can give a beautiful example here. Now, Reliance Communication has taken a loan, and Reliance Industry is the corporate guarantor for that particular loan. However, the Reliance Communication defaults in repayment of a loan. The Reliance Industry is called forward that the principal borrower has default, now you're liable to pay the loan. However, the insolvency petition, that is the CIRP petition, has been filed against Reliance Communication. The moratorium is declared. The moratorium will be only applicable to the corporate debtor, not to the guarantors of the corporate debtor. It should be known to everyone that the moratorium is declared by the NCLT is not declared on the corporate guarantors. The corporate guarantors are not bound by the moratorium period, as it has been amended by the later Amendment Act, that the Section 14 moratorium is not applicable to the corporate guarantor of a corporate debtor and even to the personal guarantors also. Now, BK Educational Private Limited versus Parag Gupta and Associates. This is one of the important judgment. As we all know about the Law of Limitation Act 1962. Earlier, once the code was brought into the enforcement, there was none section regarding the limitation. However, later through a Amendment Act, the Limitation Act was applicable to the proceedings of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code also by introduction of a section 238A. Here, the Limitation Act is applicable on the IBC. As I stated in the beginning, that within the 3 years of a default, the petition has to be filed. After that, you cannot claim your time-barred debt. As per law of limitation, you cannot claim your time-barred debt. So within the 3 years, the limitation has to barred. But however, now there are different scenarios are dealt by the NCLT here. Different scenarios, like we can say, now for example, I have paid my first installment. Then I have defaulted for a time period. Then again I have paid my second installment. Again I have defaulted. The limitation period here keeps on extending. The limitation here will be counted from the date of a last default, not from the date of a first default. Next is JK Jute Mills Majdoor versus Jogilal Kamplapat Jute Mills Company. Now we all know who are the persons, as I stated: HUF, individual partnership firms, LLP companies. Are the trade unions or the Majdoor Sabha considered as persons? Yes, they are considered as persons because they are considered as an operational creditor. Our employer is paying a salary to the employee. Employee is in against that salary is providing his services to the corporate debtor. So the trade unions can also file petition under section 9 of the code. They are considered as a person within section 2 clause 3 of the code. Thank you all. If you all have any questions, please feel to ask in the chat box. Okay, I have got some of the questions that I've got two questions in the forms. That is, what is more important, the time-bound procedure or the maximization of the value of the asset? See, both are the core objectives as mentioned in the preamble of the code. That time-bound procedure is also important, but more important is maximization of the value of the asset of the corporate debtor. How much, as much as value we maximize from the running concern of a corporate debtor, that much claims will be satisfied. How much higher is the maximization of value, that much higher is the satisfaction of the claims. The second question which I got from the participants here was regarding the why was IBC brought into the picture? See, IBC was brought into the picture. Before IBC, there was the Provincial Insolvency Act, Presidency Insolvency Act, which was applicable on only the towns of Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and all. But however, these were like a lot of time consuming. Recovery of banks, recovery of debt due to Financial Institutions or Banks Act, that was there and all. However, they were long. These remedies were available to the creditors, but these remedies were long time consuming. However, IBC is like, we can say, a good remedy, a matured step, because it provides a time frame within which the process has to be completed. Now, the main thing, there is one section 12A regarding the withdrawal of a petition. Now, once the petition we file under section 7, 9 or 10, now if the creditor has got any of the settlement with the debtor or corporate debtor outside the court or outside the tribunal, he can withdraw his petition under section 12A by passing of a resolution which is approved by the 90% of the votes of the COC. Otherwise, they cannot withdraw that petition. Before that, section 10A was recently, during this epidemic, that section 10A amendment was brought. However, the period was suspended for 6 months, and further it can be suspended for 1 year, as stated in section 10A. That such that no petition for insolvency or the bankruptcy will be entertained within such period. Reason behind it, why it won't be entertained? Because During this pandemic, everyone is facing, the economy is facing a lots and lots of issues. There is no economic growth during this pandemic. The economy is fully shaken. And due to this, the central government by notification in the month of March, they have increased the minimum amount of default to the limit of a rupees 1 crore. During such period, no petition can be entertained. However, one more thing, earlier the default amount was rupees 1 lakh and now it is 1 crore. It has a retrospective and the prospective effect. The petitions or the default which are occurred before the section came into the picture, before the amendment came into the picture, before if the default has occurred before the amendment came into the picture, then the petition will be entertained. However, if the petition are filed with the minimum amount of default of 1 lakh rupees after the amendment, it has a retrospective rate. It cannot be. The major part now, one more thing under section 238A, limitation. However, the default has occurred in year 2014. From that 3 years, within 3 years, you can file a petition. However, the IBC was brought into the picture of 2000 in year 2016. It came into the enforcement. If you file a petition during that during the IBC era, it will be rejected by the Honorable NCLT. The reason being, NCLT will say, were you waiting for that the IBC will come into enforcement? Why you have not opted for the other remedies with the civil courts or any kind of other good remedies? So that all things comes here into the picture. Basically, IBC is like, we can say, a good mechanism, a good regime. It is, IBC is not meant for the recovery. Practically, I would like to mention one more thing over here is the petition which are filed by the operational creditor under section 9. Majorly the matter gets settled then and there within the NCLT. How? Because you are an operational creditor, you are filing a petition there, you are having your claim of, like, we can say 2 crore, 3 crores. Now the corporate debtor, what they will do? They will only maximum what they can do, they can dispute the interest rate, because a person providing a working capital as a loan to the corporate debtor will be asking for the interest also now. So the corporate debtor will dispute the interest rate. The corporate debtor majorly are ready to pay the operational rates, because there the matter comes to an settlement in major of the cases. But there might be like hardly 5% or the 10% of the cases where the insolvency petition are admitted. Thank you all of you, and thank you so much everyone for attending the session. And if you have any questions, feel free to mail or ask to any of the process. I will be helpful to you all. Thank you all.
I request the participants, if they have any sort of questions, they can put it in the chat box also.
Dear attendees, if you have any kind of a questions here, please feel to type in the chat box. I will address all the queries.
Sir, I don't think there are any questions at the moment. So if there are no questions, I think we can conclude the webinar and move to the vote of thanks.
Okay. I'm thankful to all the attendees for giving you such a precious time and listening me in a very patient manner. I know it is a Sunday evening, but I kept this timing as to get so that more of the people can attend, will be free from the works and all. But anyways, I'm thankful to all of you for attending this webinar In case if any questions or any doubts, feel free to reach me at any point of a time. Thank you so much, all of you, and thankful to the Being Logical for arranging such kind of a good webinar for me. Thank you all. Thank you, Vikrant. Thank you, JLSR, for being as a part for being such kind of a good host.
On behalf of Being Logical and JLSR Journal, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to Pulkit Mahawar sir for joining us and taking out time from his busy schedule. The session was extremely enriching and informative, sir. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Further, we also thank all the participants for their active participation. Thank you.